The radical left Democrats have hit pay dirt again, just like with the fake and fully discredited Steele dossier. I'm going to skip over this because it's a lot. And then he writes, also, unlike Republicans, they stick together like glue. Their new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. And my past supporters have bought into this bullshit. Hook, line, and sinker. They haven't learned their lesson and probably never will, even after being conned by the lunatic left for 8 long years. I have had more success in 6 months than perhaps any president in our country's history, and all these people want to talk about, with strong prodding by the fake news and the success-starved Dems, is the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. Let these weaklings continue forward and do the Democrats' work. Don't even think about talking of our incredible and unprecedented success, because I don't want their support anymore. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Make America great again. I mean, that's exactly how I feel, right? I said this on the show last week. I have been posting about this. I've written numerous articles on Substack. This is how I feel about it. But I know, Charly, you don't feel the same way.
Well, I don't, just because I think now that we know that we're not going to have access to this list, this black book, whatever we want to call it, right? I don't know what form it took. I don't know exactly what information it included, the tens of thousands of hours worth of video. We knew that it existed. Pam Bondi spoke about it, said straight up it was on her desk. Kash Patel was saying this is in the hands of the FBI. I mean, for forever, this is the narrative we've been given, right? And we know that the people on this list, while not everybody may be guilty, some may be just by association, but we have pretty good knowledge that there are at least like a good amount of P files on this list, black book, whatever you may have. And I think just seeing the fallout also now having transpired after the fact, like Dan Bongino being really upset that there has been this potentially massive cover up. Now, you have the idea that it either needs to be Pam Bondi remaining in Trump's cabinet or Dan Bongino. I think seeing that and hearing the intense emotion coming from Bongino, because he's somebody that I completely respect. I've only known him to be entirely credible and somebody that like really is an America First guy. I don't know so much about Pam Bondi, but I feel like when Dan Bongino comes out and raises hell about something like this, it means we all should be listening. And I do think that there's something potentially very sketchy going on. And I do think that Pam Bondi has a good idea of what that could be. Or if it's not something sketchy, then maybe just from the beginning, she was completely overpromising and then, of course, underdelivered. So whatever it might be, they made this whole big spectacle. She said, matter of fact, it's on my desk. We're going through it. The whole administration had said, you will have access to this information, Trump included. And then suddenly there's no list. I don't know. It rubs me the wrong way. I feel like for an administration that promised complete transparency, this just is not a good look. And I think that Dan Bongino, for example, his hands are tied because while he's someone who has been able to totally speak his mind for such a long time, and that's kind of what he's since built his brand on, right? That's why he was so successful in the podcasting world, because he was just somebody that always said it exactly like it was. And now it feels like his hands are tied and almost like his mouth has been zipped shut, being a part of this administration in a sense. And he can't really say exactly what's on his mind, which is why it's either he stays or Pam Bondi stays. And if she stays, then he needs to go. So, I mean, you can't ignore that. Why would he be so emotional about something that ultimately doesn't matter if it didn't?
I think a lot of the drama, to what you're pointing out, a lot of it was spun up by influencers, by people in the space who are not getting this information necessarily directly from Bongino. Do I think it's possible it was leaked because he was upset? Of course. But is that his style? You would know better. But a lot of this anger feels spun up by the influencer class when the average American really doesn't care to this degree. Like, I agree. I understand what you're saying, but I think it is a lesser sin to have exaggerated what they thought they were going to be able to share with us and then to realize that in order to release this information, it would cause so much chaos that that's not actually in the best interest of our country. And it's better to have people be angry about what they promised before than to actually come out with this information. Because here's something that I will go against the grain of a lot of people, and I know you don't agree with this, but I don't think we are entitled to know everything. And actually, Scott Adams had a really good
No,
take
no,
on
no, no. I agree with you. I don't think why would we be entitled to, we wouldn't be able to operate as a country if we were entitled to know everything. There's a lot of things that need to be kept secret for national security purposes and even more purposes beyond that. No, I do not believe we're entitled
Okay.
to everything. I just think when you go just so far above and beyond to say we have the influencer event, like why do the influencer event was the stupidest thing in the world. I thought it was stupid then. I think it's stupid now. They just shouldn't have done that.
There are
But
two
like,
things here. I don't really want to dwell on that, but we know from people, I know a lot of people who were there who did not break the embargo they were under, who did not hold up the binders for the
but
photographers.
there's some that did.
But there are some that did because they were clout chasing and decided that they had to show off a fake scoop, whereas over half of them were never in those photos. Did you see ALX doing it? Did you see Colin Rugg doing it? Was Isabel Brown or none of them did it because they understood what they were instructed to not do. Okay, so that's on that. Okay, I see your point. I get what you're saying about the overpromising. Here's what I think they've assessed that clearly, especially with this response, and I actually think some of it was the response to everything with Iran and the week leading up to the B-2 bombs. They saw that there's very little nuance in the space and that people actually can't handle information like an adult. Because I think if people came to us and to many of our listeners and they said, listen, we have a lot of information here, we have stuff, it would be catastrophic to the world and not truly in our best interests to release this, not because we want people off the hook, but because we have too many things to actually make sure happen in our country.
Then they should say that.
But I think they've assessed that people cannot handle the truth, because if they admit that they have certain information, but that information is incomplete, right? Like we know people, like just like Trump's on the list, like we know people are associated with this. It would take a decade to go through this information. They know that the mob would say, this angry mob right now would say, then give us the information and we'll parse through it because we deserve to know. And they've realized that saying that they have anything will make people demand it.
I get it. But like, I also, obviously, there are a lot of names on that list that are going to make people I can't imagine. I mean, I honestly can't imagine. We already have like a little bit of an idea of who potentially could be on that list. They knew this before. Why even like make it a thing? It probably just could have faded into oblivion if they wouldn't have brought it up and made this big grandiose like spectacle surrounding it for such a long time. It could have just faded away. Even like Diddy, like no one's even talking about Diddy anymore. You know what I mean?
It shows you that it's very hard to get justice, and all you get is millions in Diddy's case, what would be billions in the Epstein case. It's millions of dollars. It's a giant spectacle. For what? Right? For like, he wasn't convicted of those. He was convicted of other crimes that were like basically like the racketeering and stuff like that, but he wasn't convicted of assaults, of trial. Like that was not the conviction. And so that, I think they know that that's what happened with, that's what would happen with Epstein. I do want to read something. This was a comment in response to my Substack that I thought was really well written, and I agree completely with the sentiment. This woman wrote, "You've identified something we pretend not to see. The people demanding transparency aren't asking for justice. They're asking for content. They want the spectacle, not the convictions. What strikes me is how we've convinced ourselves that mob justice and actual justice are the same thing. They are not. One feeds our need for immediate satisfaction. The other requires patience we don't have. The uncomfortable truth, most of us would rather have something to be angry about than something that actually works."
No, I agree with that. I totally agree with that. I 1000% agree with it. I just think there shouldn't have been the way it was handled. Then we could potentially just blame it on how it was handled, which was a massive failure.
I agree with that.
I don't know what it means as far as like, is somebody going to end up leaving the White House? Is Dan Bongino leaving? Is Pam Bondi leaving? I don't know.
No, but they aren't.
Okay.
Unless Bongino leaves but I don't think he will, because Dan Bongino is a patriot and he is serving his country. And so if he were as frustrated as the rumor mill was saying he was over the last week, I would venture a guess that Trump had a conversation with him and said, I can't afford to lose you right now.
Calmed him down a little bit. Yeah, I mean, he didn't show up to work at one point last week. He took a few days off. Maybe, sometimes it's good. Just remove yourself from the situation, reflect on it. I mean, I'm sure conversations to your point were had. And
that's what bothers me, like to the point of that excerpt I just read, that response. these influencers who supposedly care about Trump's success and our country's success calling for a replacement of Pam Bondi is ridiculous. Trump saying he likes the job she's doing, she's getting stuff done for him. The last thing Trump needs is a spectacle. These people want a head on a spike. That's what they want. And Trump is saying, no, I actually want to get things done. And the same people who were saying get rid of Pam Bondi, they were saying, we should get Matt Gaetz. As if the first time they tried to confirm him wasn't enough proof that he is unconfirmable for that position, for frankly many other positions. So it's just, it's people want a spectacle.